Well, I actually will give you the opposite. I'll give you the default situation where there is no design thinking, which is what happens in 99% of corporations and 99% of situations, and what goes wrong if you do that. And I need to explain the psychology of why people would not do design. There are a few reasons for that. So definitely there's a lack of capability. That's an issue. But the bigger issue in corporate life is the jump to solutions. Corporate life is Solutionsville. Because when I've got a solution, I'm in control. So if I'm a senior manager, I've got to have solutions. A common thing in corporations is don't come to your manager with a problem, come with a solution. Now, but the jump to solution in the human being is a psychology of fear. Because if I don't have a solution, I've got to have faith. And I've got to have faith in, okay, we'll work something out. And one of my long-standing clients is the number 2 or 3 in one of the world's biggest banks. And so he's American and the bank's very big around the world. I won't mention who they are. And ironically, he was the CFO, global CFO at the company at one stage. But he just loves my approaches and we work together a lot. If he were sitting here to name what we did, he said, you guys are comfortable with ambiguity. He said that all the time. You actually love it. We hate it. And we get rid of it as quick as we can, including denying it exists. So what tends to happen in the jump to solutions, if you think about it, is all we do is repeat the past. It's extrapolation, not creation. Now, I was advising a major project management institute, heavily funded by one of Australia's wealthiest men, who started Australia's biggest engineering company. You wouldn't have to do too much research to work out who they are, but I think they'd be quite fine me mentioning it. And with his advisory board, who included past premiers of New South Wales, extremely senior people. And I said to him, well, what's wrong with project management? And he's talking about big infrastructure projects, hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars. He said, well, they all go wrong. And everyone in the room nodded. These are people who've run the country, run banks. They said, he's right. It could be a big IT project. I said, now, and they just said, well, worst the effect of they all go wrong. Now, they didn't have the framework to name it, but they knew what didn't work. It's not a problem of project management or project delivery. You know, it's not on time, on budget. That's fine. We're building the wrong thing. He gave me an example. He said, look, Tony, he said, there are 3 LNG plants in northern Queensland. They all built on time and on budget. There should be 1. Now, what's this? Well, this is up the front. It's this vacuum that we begin to call the missing middle. In other words, human beings have an instinctive, oh, we need a problem, and then they jump to a solution. They just leapfrog right across this thing called design, which design, the big word in design is what, not how. Like, what should we do? What, not how. Once you've worked out what you should do, the how is more complicated. It'll take care of itself. So the vacuum of the missing middle is the reason that everywhere, in their view, when I explained that, they all absolutely, the energy in the room went up. That's exactly what's wrong. And what they said, there is no institutional forums. Because when you're in a big infrastructure project, as an example, everybody's got an agenda. The developers are there. They want to sell their program. They want their solution. So nobody's incentivized to say, oh, hang on, we just got to work out what we should do here, because the solution might involve none of us. No one's prepared to do that. So there's something very ethical about this white space. What we've done in Second Road is, therefore, we've only been able to do this when we had a courageous client with the authority to declare the space open. I think I can talk about this one publicly. The one in some ways we're proudest of is the Indigenous community of Australia. My friend Noel Pearson and I have worked together for a long time, and Noel has got very attracted to the design thinking toolkit that I've created, and a man I admire immensely. He's obviously probably Australia's leading intellectual in Indigenous affairs, possibly in all politics. But anyway, the situation of the Indigenous community in Australia is that after ATSIC, which was the federal department that distributed Indigenous funds, was abolished in Canberra by the Howard government because it was essentially bad at managing money, they threw the baby out with the bathwater, which meant policy. They threw policy out as well. So therefore, Indigenous people no longer crafted Australia's Indigenous policy or didn't have a voice into it at all at the national level. And so white 50-year-old men in Canberra created the policy for the Indigenous community. What the Indigenous community did, and a lot of very senior white people are against this as well, businessmen, but anyway, the Indigenous community retreated and licked their wounds. Noel felt we've got to step up into that white space again, but there was a great deal of hurt and fear and reluctance to do that. Nobody owned that space. It's now vacant space. There's no one officially in any organisation could authorise that conversation. So Noel stepped up and we did it. We created a strategic conversation where we got representatives from the 8 major areas of Indigenous activity around Australia. They were, for instance, Cape York Partnerships was one of the 8. Interestingly, they didn't know what each other were doing for a start. They're all very massive enterprises, and I wished that cameras had been rolling because it was so impressive to see what the 8 people were doing in different areas. The one group was in Northern Territory. There were women who were sort of recovering song lines and so on. And anyway, we had a strategic conversation into this white space, and a lot of it was around agency. Like, do we want to get hurt again? Do we want to create a national voice again? Do we want to try or not? So this was very existential. The first, there was about 70 people there. They represented, more like 50, but they represented 70% of Indigenous Australia. And it was a very, very raw conversation. But they were moving into literally a vacuum to say, do we want to do something new, not done before? And that's out of that, which happened in 2013 in Gosford, out of that 2-day workshop was birthed the idea for what became the Uluru Statement from the Heart, and all the movement now in the Indigenous community to create a third voice into Canberra, which now has bipartisan support, although Turnbull betrayed them, to be honest with you, by rejecting it initially. But nonetheless, that vast movement, which continued to use design. I mean, we crafted it, and then the people who took it from there used co-design with Indigenous people. So unlike most movements, it got most of Indigenous Australia together. So that's an example of design thinking on a massive scale.